Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video, I have already discussed about that things with you, how can display your all that details with our this model, that means the details view models. So now I want to work for our create view model. So if you want to working with this create, then first of all we have to import one of the building class as a create view, create and then view. Okay, so now I want to create one of the class for this one. So here I just simply define as a class. And I just name this class as a add musician. Okay, I just simply define that name as a add musician, and then it will be inherited with our this class as a create view. So I just simply define that create view. So here first of all we have to define our model. So I just simply define that model and then our models. Here I want to insert this data in our musician table, so I just simply define as a musician table. So for access this musician table, better I want to add one of the menu. I want to add one of the menu in our navbar area, so that is in our base HTML. So into the base HTML there is a home, so now I just simply copy it. I want to take another one and I just name it as a add musician. Okay, I just name it as add musician. That means in our URL we have to create one of the URL for this one. Into the first tab name I have to create one of the name as a add. That means the URL path name as a add musician. Okay, I just name it as add musician. So now let's do that work. So now go to our URL. Into the URL I just simply copy it, and here I just simply paste it. So it should be as a add musician, add underscore musician. So now we don't need this any ID, so I just simply remove it. And into the view I have already declared one of the class, so I have declared that class name as a add musician. So I just simply copy it, and now I just simply define in our views I have defined that class as add musician, and I just name it as our add musician. So because of all in our base HTML I have already defined that name as a add musician, right? So that is our add musician. So now if you go here, so I have only added our musician. So step by step how that process actually work I want to show you. Like click as a save all, and now go to our site. Now go to a home, go to our add musician, and into the add musician here you can see it's now showing some of the error as using model from mixed in and class based add musician without fields. That means here I didn't define any fields data, right? So we have to also define that fields data. So now let's do that work. So friend, I want to show you how that process actually working, then it will be very much helpful to you. Like here now it's actually calling me to create one of the fields, so I have to define one of the fields. So after this I just simply define as the fields. Alright, I just simply define the fields, and into the field area what data you want to visible. So I want to visible, but that means I want to insert one of the first name data. That means that's all that our database field name as a first name, and then the last name, right? So I want to insert all that data. If you go to our database, if you go to our musician, into the musician there is our first name. Here I want to insert this data. I want to insert last name data, and also I want to insert that instrument data. So I just simply define as a first name field, last name field, and also I want to insert our instrument. So I just simply define as instrument. So now what exactly it should be asked, like if you now click as a save all, I just click as a save all, and now if you refresh it, now you can see it's now showing our another error, that is a template does not exist. Because of all I didn't create any template, and also it's now suggested by default one of the name. You can see by default it's created one of the name as a musician form.html. That means it's asking you to create this type of one of the HTML page. So now I want to do that work. So here I just simply copy it. So now in our first tab it's asking me to create this HTML. So in our first tab, that means it's the first tab, how much is it? As you can see everything actually commanding on. So now in our first tab area I want to create new file, and I just name that file. I just name it as a musician form.html, and I just save it. So here first of all we have to add our basic things. That means here we have to add our this extended base HTML, and also we have to end it. So I just simply copy it, and now after this I just simply finish it. So right now we don't need this. I just simply remove some of the things from here. There is base HTML. I remove it. Okay, and here I name it one of the name. I just define that h3 tag, and here I define as the add new musician. But here one thing's friend, by default, as I told you, by default it's automatically created one of the file. You can see automatically suggested one of the file as a fast tab and the musician form.html. But here you can see previously I have added the template, so here I load this template. So right now I didn't load any template, but if you now click as a save all, by default automatically it should be getting our this file. Okay, that means our musician form file. Like show you, like if you now refresh it, you can see by default it's actually getting our this file, that is our HTML I have created, that is actually the suggested one of the HTML page as a musician form. By default it's getting that file and display this file name, that is our add musician. So you can see that it's now showing our add new musician. Okay, so it's automatically actually defining this part. So for better I don't want to take any risk. So I just simply add these things also on here. So here I have created our this file name, that is our musician form. So I just simply define as a musician and then our form. So I just simply define that musician form.html. I hope you can well understand about it. So now we have to add one of the form in our musician form area, musician HTML. So now go to our musician HTML, and here after this I take one of the form. And here we don't need any class, and also we don't need any action. Here I only want to take that method will be as a post. So I just simply define as a post. So friend, here you can see I want to create some of the forms. So into this area we have to load these forms. So here there is our models and there is our musician, right? So here I have using that create view. So when you using that create view class, by default it's actually passing that all that form data with the form. So here I want to use it. So I just simply use that form. So with this form also I want to make the things as one by one. So you have to define as underscore paragraph, right? I think you already know about it. And also we have to pass that CSRF token. So I just simply define that CSRF underscore token. And also after that I want to take one of the input text for the submit. So I just simply define as the input, and text will be as a submit. And I just simply define that name will be as a submit, and I just simply define that value. I define that value as a add musician. Okay, I just name it as a add musician, and also I define better on the class. I define on the class as a btn primary. Okay, btn primary and btn sm, that means a small size. So now let's check this out. As I told you, with this form automatically it should be get our all that musician form table data. That means automatically it should be getting all data. Now let's check this out. Click as a save all, check our server, everything is running well. Now go to our home, go to our add musician. Yes, you can see friend, automatically is getting all that our field data. That means into the musician that have the three field as a first name, last name, and the installment. You can see it's now perfectly getting as a first name, last name, and the installment. So now here if you pass any data, like here I define as a test1. Okay, I name it as a test1 and test2, or test1 actually better. I just simply define another one installment name also as a test1. And now if you add this musician, now you can see it's now show some of the error as a either provided URL and define to get absolute URL. That means we have to add our this get absolute URL method into the model area. So already is actually providing all that instruction that you have to flow. Okay, that means here now we have to add this. We have to add this function in our model area. So now go to our model. So go to our model. So if you go to application, and into the application, that is our model. So into the model area after this, okay, that means our musician model. So here, okay, here after this I want to create another function as a dev, and then our function name I have defined as a get absolute URL. So already it's providing me this information. We have to create this function on our model area, so I shall simply define our this method as a get absolute URL, right? So now I want to define as a make the things as a self. So I just simply define as a self. Because of all, I think you already know about it, why I'm actually using that self. Because of all, I have created another method, another function in our one of the class area. So if you create any function into the class area, then you have to make the things as a self, right? So now I just simply define as a self, and then we have to return it. We have to return it, and before return it, here I also want to return it with the reverse. So I think you already know about it. So I have to import that reverb. So I just simply define as a form and the Django, and then the URLs. Into the URLs, from to the URLs, we have to import our reverse. Okay, I just simply define as a reverse. So now I want to use this reverse. With this reverse, I want to define that is our reverse. That means here I want to do when this form will be submitted. Okay, like here, if you go here, when this form, that means the musician form will be submitted, I want to do it should be redirected to our home. Okay, so if you want to display it, then into the reverse area, I want to pass our app name. That means into the URL. Into the URL, I have defined that app name as a fast. So I just simply define our fast app, and after that fast app, I want to pass it to our which page. I want to pass it to our index. So that is our name. I have defined this path as the index. So I just copy it, and now in our model, so here I just simply define our index. Okay, friend. So I just simply defining it, and that's all you have to do. Now let's check this out. If you now click as a save all, first of all I want to check it. Yeah, everything is running well. So now I want to insert some of the data. If you now go to our home, and you can see our previous data is already inserted. So now I want to add our new one. So now I just name it as a Johnny Khan. Okay, and then I name it in installment as a Harmony. Okay, I just name it as a Harmony. So now if you want to add that musician, yes, you can see it's now perfectly inserted this data. So that is our John Khan, and here if you go to this position, it's now showing as a John Khan, and that is a Harmony. Okay, friend. That means now we can see how much easily we can insert this data with using our model. So here I have created this model. So I have created this model as a create view. So with this create view, now we can actually successfully insert this data. So here I load our form, and also in particular that area, it's actually providing me some of the instruction to we have to add this get absolute URL into the self. And here I returned it. When this data will be inserted, then it should be redirected to our fast app index. That means in our URL. So into the URL, I have already defined our path as a home. For the home, I have defined that name as the index path. So now you can see when this data is inserted, after that inserted, it's redirected to our home page, right, friend? And also here, if you want to define this type of functionality, like when this our musician will be inserted, it should be redirected to our this specific musician details page with the ID. Okay, so also if you want to defining it, you can defining it. Like right now I am actually pass that things to in our index, right? So here I have already defined that things on here as a fast tab. It should be redirected when this data will be inserted. This data will be redirected to our fast tab with the index page. So now I want to pass it with our musician details page. So if you go to our URL, into the URL, here you can see that is actually musician details. So into the musician details also I have defined one of the ID. That means it should be redirected to a specific one of the ID musician details page. So now I want to use it. So here if you want to pass it, then I also want to show you that things. Okay, that I just simply define as a musician details, and then here also we have to define one of the ID, right? Because here you can see I have defined already one of the ID, so we have to also define one of the ID on here. So if you want to define that ID, then you have to define that again with the key arguments. That means the KW and then argument args. Okay, so with this you can actually pass it. So here we have to pass our this pk. So I just simply define that our pk ID, that means our ID name, and then also make the things as a self. That means self, and with this self you have to define your primary key again. That is our another primary key. That means there should be our URL, that means this one, and after that our primary key. Okay, so I just simply define this part on particular that area. So friend, that's all you have to do. Now let's check this out. If you now click as a save all, I just click as a save all. So before that was actually redirected to our fast app index. So now I want to redirect it to our musician details page with a specific ID. Okay, that means when this musician actually created, by default it's creating one of the ID. So it should be redirected to our that part. Better first of all I want to check it. Yeah, everything is well. Now go here, go to that add musician. Now I want to define another one as a new test. And I just put that name, that means last name, as a new list last, and the installment as a new test installment. Okay, so this type of one of the name I have defined. Click on the add musician. Yes, now you can see friend, now it's perfectly redirected to our musician details with ID. So that is the musician I have created. So now for the reasons you can see I defined as a musician details, it should be redirected with our ID, right? So now it's perfectly redirected and display that data on here. And if you go to the home, yeah, you can see it's now perfectly added. So friend, we successfully complete our create portion. How much easily we did that work with using our this model. So that is our create view model, right? So in our next video I want to discuss about how can update this. So it's also very much easy how we can do that work. In our next video I will show you that things with a live example. So thanks for watching and I will see you in the next video.